In addition to what comes in front of our committee, this is intensely relevant and intensely concerning. Now, I don't very often agree with Mr. Schulz, as fellow members of the committee will know, but I have to say I absolutely agree with him here. There is this association agreement, which is highly controversial, highly political, will have implications and consequences which need very, very careful thinking about. And there's absolutely no sign that Mr. Roeder, who is the most evasive person I've ever heard in front of this committee, has even thought about it. And the proposition in front of the committee and the proposition in front of the Parliament is that this be accelerated through. Well, I don't know what you guys have been smoking. I was brought up in the 60s. But I must say, I think it's a completely bizarre approach. There should be a time for very careful reflection, very careful pause, very careful thinking through of what are the consequences. What are the consequences for the nation states of Europe? What are the consequences for our own countries? What are the consequences for the economies? And there's not one scintilla of evidence that anybody's thought about anything in any sort of measured way, except to go in and to say, we had the American ambassador earlier today, so I can use American wisdom, except to say, yippee, let's just ride in and corral in yet another association agreement. I heard what Mr. Wren said, actually. By the way, there's a lot of people in the Parliament who can profoundly disagree with what you and your other ex-commissioner think. You said that the GDP per capita in Poland was 20,000 euros, and the GDP per capita in Ukraine is 5,000 euros. Yes, that's what? 7,000. I'm so sorry for not hanging on to every word, sir. I mistook it down wrong. Anyway, it's 20,000 versus 7,000. But you admitted the fact that one of the reasons why Poland has done so well is because of the massive subsidies from the European Union. And what? What? And if Ukraine became a member of the European Union, they would expect and would get similarly massive subsidies. And this is at a time when my constituents and Mr. Martin's constituents, and perhaps not your constituents, but the constituents of an awful lot of other members of Parliament, are being asked to cut back. And frankly, it's completely unrealistic. And it just shows the never-never land that you people live in. And one of the advantages of being an MEP is that your absurd comments will hopefully be corrected and held to account. And I think I've got one final point to make, is that obviously we have a profound concern. The population of the Ukraine is approximately 70 million. I'm delighted Mr. I've got 58 or so. I've got the figure. Perhaps you'll correct me. What's the approximate percentage? What? Approximately 45 million people. Now, it would be very, and we are concerned that the immigration controls which are already in place remain in place, and that there's no agreement whereby there is some backdoor abolition of visas or of passports. I did have something to say about the proposition that the EU should get together in trilateral relations. I must say I can't imagine anything more disastrous, but I think that's not really a subject for this committee. So I will look forward to hearing once some proper and non-evasive answers from Mr. Garcia Bercero.
Thanks a lot. And now it's
on the questions about the impact of the DCFTA and the association agreement in the European Union and in Ukraine. It goes without saying that the Commission is fully ready to provide any information which is requested by the European Parliament on this following the ratification. Perhaps it is useful to remind that as far as the European Union is concerned, we are already granting preferential treatment to Ukraine, and what this agreement would do would be to firmly consolidate this in a permanent manner. As far as the Ukrainian side is concerned, they will be for the first time opening their market preferentially to the European Union, and they will also assume a number of commitments to progressively align themselves with the European Union regulations. But all of those commitments are very flexible. They leave plenty of scope for Ukraine to decide the pace and the rhythm under which they would approximate themselves with the European Union acquis. And it goes without saying that the European Union is ready to fully support that process of alignment. That's precisely the main rationale why we have created this task force. I'm sorry that Mr. Peter Balázs, who is here in the task force, is not available here today, but he would certainly be able to come to this committee in the future to update you on the work of the task force. But the basic objective will be to be sure that we can provide effective support to Ukraine in their basic political choice taken by their legitimate government to progressively align themselves with the regulations of the European Union.
I've just got one very, very quick and simple question. Are there any provisions in the association agreement, or are there likely to be provisions in the association agreement that will relax the present regime relating to visas between the Ukraine and countries of the European Union?
I'm afraid I'm not familiar with issues relating to visas in the association agreement. Of course, this is not at all part of the DCFTA. The DCFTA has traditional commitments on services, but nothing related to visas. But I mean, I have taken note of the question on that, and I will be very happy to provide it to this committee after I have consulted with my colleagues. But my understanding is that certainly there is nothing in the DCFTA concerning visas, where in the broader political provisions of the association agreement there is something that, quite honestly, I do not know, but I have to very much listen to your question. I would be quite happy to provide a reply. Now, I'm not going to, I mean, perhaps one issue that was also raised previously was what about the Crimea? I mean, you obviously know that we do not accept the illegal annexation of Crimea by the Russian Federation, and therefore Crimea would in no way benefit from the preferences under the DCFTA, and a number of measures have been taken also in terms of our relations with Crimea. But this is more of a political question rather than a trade question. Finally, I will not speculate about Russian sanctions. We know what is the measure that they took in July. The Commission has been, of course, taking a number of actions to support our producers to face this totally unjustified action. We are currently considering the possibility of challenging this in the WTO. This is not the topic of the discussion today, but what is very clear is we are not going to engage in a tit-for-tat type of exercise. We have taken certain measures vis-à-vis Russia, which were clearly a response to Russian measures destabilizing the situation in Ukraine. We find it very regrettable, the measures which have been taken by the Russian Federation. We are taking action to support our producers, and as I said, we are seriously reflecting about the possibility of bringing this issue to the attention of the World Trade Organization.